Hey everyone, I am MALWARE, and I am a consultant with unsecured. Today, I am excited to talk to you about the Internet of Things, commonly referred to as IoT devices, and their impact on network security. I do not perform IoT device testing, nor am I an expert on this subject, but I do know a few things about application security. So, this subject fascinates and scares me. Why? Because I am a security professional, and yet, when my husband surprised me with a new washer and dryer while I was on a business trip, and yes, he's a keeper, I had no idea they were IoT devices until they showed up on my list of connected Wi-Fi endpoints, along with Roku and other internet-connected devices, while I was trying to troubleshoot my Wi-Fi network. This concerned me greatly, as I had no idea how to communicate or configure them, and they were on the same network as my personal and professional laptops. Hacking my washing machine is not an enticing target for hackers, but these vulnerable endpoints can be used to make lateral moves that can cause much more data exposure from other network-connected devices, or be used as bots in distributed denial of service attacks, a point which will be explained in more detail later in this presentation. For the record, my IoT consumer devices have not been segmented onto a separate network. Anyway, I decided to do a presentation about IoT devices based on research I did online and interviews with actual IoT experts at Aptiv. This will be a high-level discussion about IoT devices, their ecosystem, and their impact on network security. So what are these IoT devices? Definitions of this term differ widely, but here's a summary of some of the most popular ones. They are gadgets that seem innocuous, but they have processing power and internet connections. They are physical devices that have computing power and can transfer data over networks, sometimes without requiring user interaction or even awareness. They are embedded devices that are connected to the internet or other networks and integrate with services to exchange data and receive commands. They are web-connected devices that are not commonly thought of as computers, but they have processing power and internet connections. They have IP addresses and the ability to transfer data over networks without any user interaction or knowledge. They have been discovered and exploited by cybercriminals by standard scanning technologies, which will be discussed later in this presentation. Okay, but these are all very broad and somewhat repetitive terms. So what actually defines an IoT device? It is generally acknowledged that IoT devices have 7 characteristics, as shown in this chart. First, they have connectivity between other IoT devices, the internet, and hardware devices. They are things. They are anything that can be tagged or connected. This can be sensors, home appliances, and even tagged livestock. Devices can contain sensors or sensing materials that can be attached to the device or items. They use data, which allows action and intelligence. They have communication, exchange of data and analysis of this data between any connected IoT devices. Intelligence and analytics. They can use the data collected to determine which information needs to be transferred to other connected devices. Action. Based on the intelligence received, they determine what actions need to be done without any user interaction. The ecosystem. IoT's integration with other technologies and communities outside their internal network. And they are everywhere, and most consumers, like me, might not even know they exist on their network. For consumers, they can be in your home as appliances, such as my washer and dryer, home monitoring, such as security alarms, smart doorbells, and cameras, and home automation, for example, lights, temperature controls, and TV. They can be on yourself, also known as wearables, such as phones, smartwatches, and medical sensors such as insulin pumps and pacemakers. There is also an industrial sector commonly referred to as Industrial Internet of Things, or IIoT. They are in factories, which have smart robotics that use connected sensors to monitor robots' maintenance needs and trigger repairs before part breakdowns occur. In healthcare devices represent one of the fastest growing sectors of the IoT market, which is predicted to reach $176 billion by 2026. Healthcare devices can allow remote patient monitoring where health metrics such as heart rate, blood pressure, and temperature can be tracked. This allows patients to be monitored without having to be physically present at a medical facility. COVID-19 has escalated this practice. These IoT devices, as part of the ecosystem, can forward this patient data to software applications where healthcare professionals can view and analyze it, recommend treatments, or generate alerts. As to security, the challenge is to make sure that this highly personal data is secure and kept private. So, what is the motivation for a cybercriminal to target these devices? For one, ransomware attacks. Hospitals would be willing to pay the ransom when it is urgent to get this data back before patients' care is put at risk. In transportation, IoT ecosystems are being used to build a secure foundation to leverage IoT devices for improved passenger experience, safety, and efficiency. IoT makes mass transit more efficient by employing a network of sensors, digital cameras, and communication systems to increase system capacity and passenger safety. Video surveillance systems, which feature high-resolution cameras, secure airport and rail systems, which also increases passenger safety. Internationally, there are many smart cities where governments have implemented surveillance IoT devices for law enforcement, as well as for public conveniences. Here are a few examples. Singapore has implemented smart devices to detect smoking in prohibited areas, detect littering from high-rise buildings, and that monitor crowd density and the movement of registered cars. Dubai has applications to provide services to the population, such as the ability to find an ATM, report a business where COVID-19 best practices are being violated, such as social distancing and facial mask requirements. They can also be used to get taxi from within the area. Barcelona. This city has smart streetlights that adapt the activity on the street to adjust their usage. It also directs residents to where vacant parking spaces are available within the highly dense populated city. And finally, it has garbage sensors, which alert government workers when trash needs to be collected. And their numbers are growing rapidly. I could not find actual numbers on how many IoT devices there are currently, and even how many projected by the end of 2021. But here are some statistics and estimates which demonstrate the rapid growth of these types of devices. The IoT device revenue is currently $212 billion worldwide. The average number of connected devices per household in the USA in 2020 was 10. It was estimated that there would be 20.4 billion to 31 billion IoT devices by 2020. COVID-19 may have escalated these projections, as will be discussed later in this presentation. It is projected that there will be 75 billion IoT devices by 2025. So what is the security impact of this growth? More vulnerable devices, non-security aware consumers that have these devices on their network without even knowing they exist or the danger they present. Lack of security measures by manufacturers to secure the devices. More attack endpoints to the IoT ecosystem. And more data exposed as IoT devices become more and more integrated into our daily lives. OWASP, which stands for Open Web Application Security Project, which was originally created to track web application security vulnerabilities and the relative security risk on an ongoing basis. However, today it has a separate category just for IoT devices and the risk as is shown here. This is a slide with tiny fonts, so I will do an overview of the main categories in the next slide. While there are 10 issues listed in this incredibly tiny font, it is possible to roll these up into broader categories. Insecure default settings, such as weak, hard-coded, or publicized passwords, sometimes without a means for a user to upgrade them, if they even know how to do so. The inability to disable default admin passwords whose username and password can be commonly found through internet searches. Unneeded ports and running services, such as FTP, TCP, HTTP, and again, without a convenient way for consumers to check them or to close or disable them. Lack of device management. When vulnerabilities are found, if the manufacturer patches them, there may be no way to securely upgrade the currently deployed devices. It may require purchasing a new device, which can be really costly depending on the device. For example, hospital devices and personal health monitoring devices, such as insulin pumps, are extremely expensive to replace. The use of insecure or outdated components. Insecure ecosystem interface. So what does that mean? Encryption weakness, such as weak or non-existent encryption. Insecure data and storage mechanisms. Lack of encryption anywhere, including at rest, transit, and door processing. Users' PII that is stored on a device or an ecosystem that is used insecurely or without permission. So what defines an ecosystem? The simplest definition of a traditional ecosystem is that it is a community or group of living organisms that live in and interact with each other in a specific environment. What is the IoT ecosystem? It is the attack surface of an IoT device that goes beyond the vulnerable local device, but also to the data that it passes to other network interfaces. For example, many home automation and monitoring devices go through a hub that use alternate communications such as Z-Wave and Zigbee. In the IoT ecosystem, any device on the network can send and receive data and control from other more secure devices. So, the insecure weak device, which may seem innocuous, becomes the weak link in the network. For example, if a Z-Wave lamp dimmer is compromised, this could lead to the exploitation of more sensitive assets, such as electronic door locks. These communications can occur without any user interaction or knowledge. So now for the fun or scary part. The following is a small summary of widely publicized successful attacks using IoT devices and their ecosystems. Some of these have been done in the wild, and some of these have been done by researchers as proof of concepts. The common thread between these attacks is how one weak link can compromise an entire network of devices. One of the original and widely publicized IoT device attacks was the Jeep hack, where attackers were able to take control of the vehicle remotely and render the driver useless to control steering, braking, radio settings, and other basic functionality. Initially, this attack was performed with researchers sitting in the back seat of the vehicle and snickering as they disabled more and more of the driver's control. But with further testing and research, they were able to conduct these same attacks remotely as far as 10 miles away. This proof of concept attack brought the IoT device security risk to the forefront of media and therefore public awareness. So how was this done? This attack used a vulnerability in the Uconnect system. It was demonstrated just how easy it is to gain control of a Jeep Cherokee by manipulating the Uconnect infotainment system. This vulnerable system was then able to take over the control area network, also known as CAN, which controls the steering, braking, and other automobile functionality. The system allowed an unauthenticated connection from other access points on the Sprint network. Sprint has since blocked access to the vulnerable ports, but 1.4 million Jeep, Chrysler, and Fiat vehicles were recalled. This was the largest recall at the time due to a vehicle's network security issue. Another highly publicized and heavily fined attack was the Target breach, which occurred in 2014. This is a great example of a third-party vendor being the gateway for a massive security breach. Hackers broke into the retailer's heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system with default credentials. From there, attackers were able to install malware on the company's point-of-sale system. This breach exposed data on about 40 million debit and credit cards in the USA, Brazil, and Russia. Target had to pay $18.5 million, which at the time was the largest settlement for a data breach due to the attack. Pretty sure they got a new HVAC owner as well. We should all know about phishing attacks with a PH, where emails or texts are sent with links to malicious sites in order to install malware or trick victims to go to a bogus site and input sensitive data. But there was also an actual phishing attack at a Las Vegas casino. This undisclosed casino had a smart aquarium in its lobby, which had internet connections to control the temperature, salinity, and other environmental variables for the fish's habitat. Access to the fish tank's thermostat was accomplished, but try as I could, I was unable during my research to determine how this first breach was accomplished. But once access to the vulnerable thermostat was accomplished, the hackers were then able to scan for other vulnerabilities and move the lateral to other places in the network. They were then able to pull the database of gamblers' PII across the network, out of the fish tank's thermostat, and up to the cloud. This is another great example of the IoT ecosystem where one vulnerable device can allow an attacker to compromise the entire network. There have been many attacks on ATMs over the years, but they mostly involved a physical attack with a person at the ATM using a skimming card. This type of attack requires a criminal to install a skimmer attachment, which is disguised to look like part of the ATM. This attachment collects card numbers and PIN codes. When a card is swiped through the skimmer, these devices capture and store all the details stored in the card's magnetic strip. With most ATMs having cameras now, these types of attacks to criminals are riskier and rarer than in the past. While there has been a decline in these physical attacks, ATMs are now also vulnerable to malware attacks, which can allow skimming to be performed remotely. Surprisingly to me, ATMs are often the weakest link in the bank's security infrastructure. This is due to several reasons. They're using outdated software that is no longer supported with known vulnerabilities. Many ATMs, up to 40%, are still using Windows 7 and even older OS versions, such as Windows XP, which hasn't been supported by Microsoft since 2014. Outdated hardware is also a concern. Replacing such legacy components can be costly. National banks are usually diligent about upgrading their potentially insecure ATMs. But once you find in convenience stores or other generic ATMs are often not updated. So, it's not just that service fee that should make you hesitate to use them. Third-party components also have contributed to security vulnerabilities. XFS, which stands for Extensions for Financial Services, uses standard APIs to communicate with self-service applications. Software skimming malware at the vulnerable XFS layer allows attackers to gather card and PIN numbers, just like a physical skimming attack, with a reduced risk of detection.
If you are like me, you are sick of dealing with COVID-19. You get your 2 vaccines and life should go back to the way it was pre-pandemic. But we all know about the disruption that COVID-19 has had on our lives and shaped a new normal for the workforce and society in general. As workplaces have had to shut down because of the pandemic, more and more people were working remotely than ever before. And a good percentage of people may not return to brick-and-mortar workplaces as infrastructures to support telecommuting, such as video conferencing and secure IM chat applications, have made remote working every bit as productive as in-office working. I live in Atlanta, and believe me when I say the lack of lengthy commutes and traffic is an added bonus. With more vulnerable and unsecured devices out there, distributed denial of service attacks, commonly referred to as DDoS, have had an unprecedented increase. Shown here are the statistics of these increases, with 10 million DDoS attacks estimated to have occurred last year. That is a 20% year-over-year increase. The second half year of 2020 had a 22% increase alone. So, what is causing this increased volume of attacks? Most of these were aimed at industries that had exponential online transaction increases due to COVID-19. These included e-commerce, as people did not feel safe going into traditional retail stores or these stores were shut down. They turned to online shopping for items that they would generally not order over the internet. Healthcare, as more and more medical practices went to virtual appointments such as telehealth or other remote monitoring applications. Online learning. Many campuses have shut down live lectures, leaving online learning both on and off campus students as the only option. Finally, streaming services. Movie theaters are closed, so consumers and movie studios alike are turning to streaming as an alternative to theater viewings.
As stated before, employees who traditionally do not work remotely are doing so now, and often without the proper security measures in place. For instance, C-level executives are now making teleworking their new normal. Take, for example, a CFO of a financial service firm that was working remotely. Attackers were able to gain access to the executive's MacBook. From there, a smart speaker on the executive's home network that was connected via Bluetooth was found and taken over. Attackers were then able to eavesdrop on the CFO's private conversations, which included sensitive financial information. This slide shows a depiction of the MIRAI botnet, but it is applicable to most distributed denial of service DDoS attacks. A DDoS is a malicious attack from numerous bots, which are compromised devices, to disrupt the normal traffic of the target server, service, or network by overwhelming the target with a flood of internet traffic. MIRAI is a malware attack that turns Linux network devices into remotely controlled bots that can participate in a DDoS attack. The main target of this particular attack was home consumer products such as baby monitors, security cameras, and other low-cost home automation devices. MIRAI scanned big blocks of the internet for open tail networks. It then attempted to log in using just 62 user password combinations that are likely to be used as default for these kinds of devices. These included passwords such as admin, password, and 1234. At its peak, MIRAI had an estimated 400,000 bots that attacked the domain server system, which impacted many corporate giants such as Amazon, Netflix, Starbucks, and many more. Shortly afterwards, the malicious code was posted online and made publicly available. Why would they do this? The more copycat hackers that are out there using this code provides a better smokescreen to the original cyber criminal. As I stated earlier, Healthcare is one of the fastest growing sectors for IoT devices. Personal insulin pumps have been exploited in proof of concept trials. Because of these simulated attacks, which allowed for remote access to the device, units were recalled by the manufacturer. The risk was attributed to insecure wireless communication between the pump and other medical devices. The FDA issued an alert in 2019, but up to 4,000 consumers are still potentially using vulnerable pumps. The good news is that there has not been any reported incident of harm caused by this vulnerability. As I said in my introduction, I am not an IoT device tester. So why not? How does traditional security application or pen testing differ from IoT testing? Well, they have different sets of software, hardware tools, and security knowledge backgrounds. So, here's what a typical application security testing setup looks like. Basically, a laptop with installed security applications such as Burp Suite and other automated testing tools. And of course, the tester having application security knowledge to know how to use these tools. Full disclosure, this is my testing setup with 2 external monitors which have been cropped from this photo. Now, this is what a typical lab looks like for security testing of IoT devices. In addition to hardware equipment, it requires the tester to have an electrical engineering degree and or a deep knowledge of electronics for this testing to be successful. Unlike traditional security testing, IoT security tests require inspection and often disassembly of the devices. It also requires application and mobile tests because many of the IoT devices have web interfaces or mobile apps for control and configuration. As was shown in the previous slide, this type of lab requires an extensive inventory of hardware equipment, as is listed here. It needs debuggers, logic analyzers, oscilloscopes, power supplies, software design radios, also known as SDRs, a soldering station for building custom boards, and finally, memory readers. IoT device testing also requires specific software tools beyond traditional web application tools. For example, Wireshark, which is a network packet analyzer which captures data and can allow a tester to determine if passwords or other sensitive data are going across the wire in clear text. This is not always detected by Burp Suite if the protocols in use are not HTTP or HTTPS. Shodan is a publicly available service that scans for devices connected to the internet and can identify ones using default credentials. As stated before, IoT devices can have mobile apps, so mobile testing is also needed. And finally, traditional application testing software, since, again, many IoT devices have web application interfaces for control and configuration. So how do you, me, or any other consumer secure your IoT devices? As mentioned before, changing passwords from default or weak ones may not be possible. But it is an option. Change them to strong passwords like ones you would set for your PC. Again, if possible, disable default passwords, especially for admin accounts. Keep your software updated if there is a secure mechanism for doing so. Secure your Wi-Fi and routers with strong passwords. Finally, keep your IoT devices on a separate network. As has been repeated throughout this presentation, sometimes there is no way to secure your device, so make sure they are on a separate network. Do not have your refrigerator and your PC on the same network. Then target. Attackers may be able to compromise a vulnerable IoT device, but they will not have access to your sensitive data. Thank you for attending this presentation. I hope you found something useful from it. Please reach out to me at sharon.malar@optiv.com for any questions about the content of this presentation.